Please make sure where your kids are. Please make sure that if they're running around, that's great. But if there's a lot of talking, if 15, 20, 30 people are talking, as you can tell, the mic system is not that powerful. So we want people to please just keep in mind that if you decide to talk, then you're more than welcome to talk, but please go outside into the lobby. Number one. Number two, please, 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 we don't want kids getting hurt. We don't want children to not come back because they're getting yelled at. We want kids to be here, but we also want the program to go well, inshallah, tonight. So for those of you that are wondering, who is Imam Suhaib Webb? Imam Suhaib Webb is a graduate of the University of Central Oklahoma with a background in education and Azhar University from the College of Sharia. Imam Suhaib has served various communities in North America and is currently the founder of Swiss. He currently shares advice, lessons, and Snap was on his Snapchat. He currently lives in New York and serves as the scholar in residence at the Islamic Center at New York University. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask Imam Suhaib to open the floor. Inshallah, we'll take it from there.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد سيد الأولين والآخرين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We send peace and blessings upon our beloved messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, upon his family, his companions, and those who follow them until the end of time. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, it's great to be here in Connecticut. Alhamdulillah, haqqo jari, haqqo dari. You know, they say like the right of your neighbor is the right of your house, so we're neighbors. Alhamdulillah. I live in New York City. You're here in Connecticut. MashaAllah. And it's also great to see Nihal, who I've known since he was really small, MashaAllah. It's great to see him growing and developing and becoming a scholar, becoming an academic, alhamdulillah, refining himself. And then of course it's great to be here with pure hands. As Sheikh Ammu Salah, he mentioned, the catastrophe that's happening in Yemen is undoubtedly somewhat unique and very problematic. So it's great to see the American Muslim community, subhanAllah, who itself finds itself like under a lot of pressure, a lot of challenges. It's great to see us still committed to charitable work, development, and supporting people who definitely are in tremendous need. So as he said, he mentioned to me today he wanted to do kind of like a conversational type setting, which is actually awesome. That means I don't have to talk very long, alhamdulillah. But I think there is a few things we should note, because the Muslim is someone who is awake and aware. As Allah says to the Prophet, أَن تَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ, that you have been reminded so that you can stand for Allah. Imam al-Harari, he said, أَن تَقُومُوا أَيْ الْيَقَظَةِ, meaning like you're woke, like you're aware, like you're engaged. So standing here is like a metaphor that the Prophet is saying that you need to be in a state of ihsan. Like you need to be aware that Allah is watching you and you need to live that way. And we know that that of course is the highest level of iman. The hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the hadith of Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فلم تكن تراه فإنه يراك, like worship Allah as though you see Him. Imam al-Baghawi mentions another narration, أن تعمل لله, right, that you act for Allah. So in order for us to achieve ihsan, we need to be strategically aware of the era that we live in. And also when we understand our purpose is to be muhsinin, then, the test and the trials and the success, all that's just salt on the food. Because the ultimate goal, وَأَنَّ إِلَى رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى, the ultimate goal is with Allah. وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تَرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. All of us going back to Allah. And that's why the Quran said to Sayyidina Muhammad, إِنَّكَ مَيِّت, you're already dead. It didn't say إِنَّكَ سَتَمُوت. إِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ وَإِنَّهُمْ مَيِّتٌ. right? You're already dead. Like, consider yourself dead now so that you'll live a life of investment, a life of ihsan. أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. So in order to do that, we should be aware of some of the challenges and opportunities of the age which we live in. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, نِعْمَةً مَغْبُورٌ فِيهِمَا كَثِيرًا مَنْ النَّاسِ الصِّحَّةُ وَالْفَرَاغُ. You know, two blessings most people fail to use. One of them is time. And time is so important that if you look at Juz Amma, the last part of the Quran, you see actually it starts in opposition to your life cycle. So it doesn't start with birth. I think you need to turn the mic down, man. It's going to be like, yeah, former DJ. I can tell. So, and it's okay, the kids are going to play and stuff, mashallah. Unless it's bothering anybody else, like, alhamdulillah. You know, Imam Suyuti, the great scholar of hadith, he was a child playing in the masjid in Egypt of Imam Ibn Talun. Anyone from Egypt here? You know Masjid Ibn Talun, Jami' Ibn Talun. And, yeah, mashallah. فَكَانَ Suyuti, so Imam Suyuti, he was playing there as a child, like we see these kids playing, mashallah. And the sheikh was teaching, and he said, al-walad da'i, like, who's that kid? And he was an orphan. Imam Suyuti, Jalaluddin Suyuti, he died 9/11 Hijri. And they said, Hada Ibn Suyuti hada. Like, they didn't know his name because he's an orphan. He said, Ujizuhu bi kulli al-ijazat allati indi ila sayyidina Rasulillah. And he gave him ijazah as a child when he was playing. He said, because I see the light of Muhammad in his face. Yani ana ra'aytu nur as-sunnah fi wajhi. فَأَجَازَهُ عِنْدَ إِذٍ. So he gave him an ijazah, like we see these kids playing now. That's how Imam Suyuti became Imam Suyuti. Then Imam Suyuti, when he was older, because Ibn Hajar, he died 852. So all of the colleagues of Suyuti, Sakhawi, well, Sakhawi is different, but others, they didn't have this ijazah to Ibn Hajar. So he used to say, see, I was playing in the masjid and the sheikh, he was nice to me. And the sheikh, he taught me, even when I was a kid, mashallah. So alhamdulillah, yani, don't worry, like in New York City, we let them run around, alhamdulillah. And it's important because, subhanAllah, if we kick them out when they're young, and then we want them back when they have a career, so they can write checks. Yani, alhamdulillah, just we'll try to pay attention, look at this beautiful child, mashallah. I have a baby on the way too, so like, I'm a little soft, you know, I'm in my feelings. You know, I have a little girl coming, make dua, so I'm like all up in my feelings right now. You got Kleenex, bro? But it's important, seriously, that we understand the age that we're living in. And may Allah bless all of these beautiful children, alhamdulillah, and their parents. And parents, don't be embarrassed either, alhamdulillah. Yani, we're an ummah, alhamdulillah. So the first is that one of the goals of this age is to create hyper-cynicism. And that is an attempt, especially post-modernity, and then even within the education in the Muslim community, which is largely rooted in the cultural imaginations of the community and not in the foundations of deen. So you ask most Muslims their opinions about Islam, and God bless them, they're sincere, but their reflection is going to be largely informed by their culture, and that tends to be off, instead of the foundations of religion. And if we look at Muslim culture in the last 300 or 400 years, we've been getting hammered by the West. So that cultural reflection, and hammered like in Yemen by Muslims. So that cultural reflection tends to be very negative. So you couple it with the cynicism of the age, which is taught largely through neoliberal, academic circles, and through a cultural history which has been pretty difficult, right? Western intervention, post-colonial society, the war on terror, right? There is the opportunity for cynicism. And that created two challenges. Number one is the irresponsible religious leader who uses cynicism as a means to motivate people to be better. No doubt there are times we need to mention the negative to motivate people, but that shouldn't be the default. The default of the Prophet is what? وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. is to give good news to people. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But at the same time, Bashirun wa Nadhirun. He's also commanded at times to be a Nadhir, to be a warner. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So now you'll find people who have the microphone or a camera or a phone, and their message to inspire the Muslim community is that there's no hope in the Ummah. The Ummah is astray. This is the worst of times. Life is over. We don't have time to unpack this, but the text of the hadith of the Prophet would obviously refute that. But then more importantly is the broader foundational ethos of Islam, that if you lose hope in dunya, never lose hope in Rabb al-Dunya. That's the problem. So I'll give you a story. There's a number of stories that can kind of amplify what I'm saying when we get into this sense of like hyper negativity. One of the reasons also that we may be hyper cynical is that we love dunya. So we equate the success, our spiritual success, with dunya. Whereas oftentimes our spiritual success has nothing to do with dunya. They're separate. Although the goal is to make them work responsibly. Once Shaykh al-Akbar Ibn Arabi, great scholar, mashallah, he in his Futuhat al-Makkiyah, he went to Mecca and he wrote about it. It's very interesting. There's some weird stuff in there, mashallah, but it's also good. And he said, I went to Mecca and I found the most ahmaq person, رأيت على وجه الأرض, the most ignorant person I've ever seen in my life. So they asked him, who's that man? And he said, actually, he had a lot of followers. Like there were a lot of people that had amassed around him. Historically, in our Muslim community, if you go through history, the masses of the Muslims have tended to always side with charismatic imbeciles and ignore scholars. So Ibn Taymiyyah dies in prison. Baqilani goes to prison. Abu Hanifa goes to prison. Imam al-Tabari is in prison. Imam Shafi goes to, is punished. Sayyidina Malik is tortured. Ibn Nahwi, he's forced. Ibn Nahwi was such a scholar, they would go to Morocco and teach people who followed a charismatic neophyte, Abdullah bin Yasin. Abdullah bin Yasin, ma kandu usul, just literalism. And everywhere Ibn Nahwi, this great scholar, would go, he would get kicked out of the masjid. And they asked people, like, why you kick him out of the masjid? After he died, they realized he was a great scholar, right? After he died, people appreciated him, subhanAllah. And they asked, why you kick him out of the masjid? This guy is teaching stuff we don't know. Well, what you want him to teach you what you know? What's the job of the scholar? So historically, if you go through our history, the community has tended to fall for the okie doke, charismatic idiots, in the face of responsible, balanced scholarship. And this happened in the time of Sayyidina Nabi Sallallahu, when one of the Khawarij said, A'dil ya Muhammad. Right? Even a person amongst the Prophet accused the Prophet, you're not just enough. Like you should be harder than you are. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So Ibn Arabi, he ran into this guy with all these followers, and he said to him, who are you? I'm such and such person, whatever. Then he said to him, really, like, what is your dawah? Like, you have a lot of followers. He said, and this is the person he said is the most ignorant person he ever saw in his life. He said, that man said, my da'wah is that there's no, la khayra ala wajhi al-ard wa la fi qulubi ummati Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. My da'wah is that there's no good left on the earth and that the ummah of Muhammad is lost. Ibn Arabi said, this is the biggest fool I've ever seen in my life. There are so many ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that promises that the ummah will be protected from shirk, from bid'ah, and from being astray. Yet we find da'wah, some of it petrol-funded, just like the missiles that are following in Yemen are petrol-funded. And that da'wah says you can't trust the majority of the Muslims. The majority of the Muslims are lost. The majority of the Muslims are astray. So what happens is you fracture the community and we become weak. And that's the second point. So the first is we should be careful of hyper-cynicism. And we should read the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some of them are mutawatir lafzan, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam clearly states, as related by a Muslim, also in Sahih al-Bukhari, that shaitan has given up that you'll ever commit shirk. And the Prophet is not a liar, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second is that we need to focus on our unity, and we should be aware of anyone who encourages us in the name of the truth to divide ourselves. Instead, we should follow bodies, like I'm on the North American Fiqh Council with Sheikh Yasser Qadi, okay? Yeah, if the whole entire North American Fiqh Council comes together, like 30 people, and they say, like, Suhaib, 10 reasons to avoid Suhaib Webb, here's the 11th. Okay, yeah, this is a body of scholars. But if it's like some dude in the masjid that's like, yo, man, Nihal is a stray dude. Like, I saw him, he was at Home Depot, and that brother was buying, you know, oh yeah, you know what, I always thought he was a stray, subhanAllah. There's two problems with this. Number one, su'u dhan bil muslimin haram. To have a bad suspicion of Muslims is wrong. We say al-aslu bara'atu dhimma. The foundation is that we believe, all of us, mashallah, we have the ability for goodness. The second thing is, if someone slanders someone in front of you and you don't defend them, per the hadith, you became now a sinner in this slander, which is a major sin. That's why in the science of hadith, the scholars of hadith, if they came across a person who was majhulul hal, unknown, they would say, sahihun, this person is sahih, lakinnahu majhul. But he's unknown, because the origin that we engage a fellow Muslim with is bara'atu dhimma, is to assume the best. So we should be careful in this area of three things. Number one, people who make a name for themselves by attacking imams and mashaykh, not for abuse or crimes. Like if I robbed a bank, I would hope, God forbid, you would correct me. But in the area of religion, like how this person prays, how this person reads Quran, how this person whatever, this person does mawlid, this person doesn't do mawlid, blah, 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 all this stuff. This was never used. Even Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, he prayed behind people who celebrated mawlid. His best friend is Imam Ibn Jazari. Imam Ibn Jazari, Sahib al-Matan al-Jazariya, is a great Sufi. When Imam Ibn Taymiyyah died, Imam Ibn Jazari bought Imam Ibn Taymiyyah's turban for 1,000 dirham. And he used to wear Ibn Taymiyyah's turban until he died. And he said, I know my friend, he doesn't like me to wear his turban. لَكِنَّنِي أَتَبَرُّكْ بِإِمَامَتِهِ. He said, I seek barakah from his imamah, even though I know he doesn't believe I can seek barakah from his imamah. Look, subhanAllah, at the friendship they had. Even though they don't agree on religious issues, it doesn't divide them. And when the Tartar invaded Syria, they fought together. That's why Shawqi, the great Egyptian poet, he said, لَمَّا أَتَمَّ نُوحٌ السَّفِينَ وَحَرَّكَتَ الْقُدْرَةُ الْمُعِينَ. When Prophet Nuh, he finished the boat, جَرَى بِهَا مَا لَا جَرَى بِبَارِي, it began to rock with a great storm, and what was witnessed had never been seen before. From those of you from Pakistan, India, Shawqi is the Iqbal of the Arab world. Same time period. Then he says, حَتَّى مَشَى اللَّيْثُ مَعَ الْحِمَارِ وَأَخَذَ الْقِطُّ بِيَدِ الْفَارِ. He said it became so scary that the donkey and the lion went to each other as the boat is like this. And the lion said to the donkey, yo, I'm so sorry, man. All those years I tried to eat you. Please forgive me before we die. And the donkey said, no, it's okay. I taste good. Khalas. You know. And he said the rat and the you know, Tom and Jerry, man, the cat and the mouse, they were like, what's up, dog? Love you. Got you. Right? They hugged and they embraced. And he said the goat and the wolf were like this, walking down the boat. The point he's trying to say is that the Muslim community is worse than animals, because in the face of existential threats, at least animals can love each other. But now we see our community, Islamophobia, which is now an international monetary, it's better than Bitcoin. You know what I mean? You want to make money, just write about Muslims and say we're crazy. So the second is, we need to be careful of anyone who comes amongst us and tries to weaken us in the name of religion, unless it's coming from a body of scholars. That's why Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, He said, if you see somebody constantly attacking religious leadership, you should run from them. The second thing is a community that amplifies its ethnicity, its race, its madhab, its money, in order to create differences. We should avoid that. Like I believe nonprofits, we might talk about this in a minute. Nonprofits, I believe anyone on a board, number one, should be praying Fajr at least twice a week in the masjid. Number two is they should all take conflict resolution theory. Now we call it in university conflict transformation. Because we see boards fight, and also our boards don't function properly. If you think about major corporations, boards, they don't get involved in day-to-day things. But the boards in our nonprofits, boy, they up in everything, like the kind of cups you're going to use for iftar, and where the lines are for the rope, and what qira'ah the Imam is going to read. Like, that's not the job of a board. That's Orwellian autocracy. And the third is, if we're going to talk about unity, then we need everyone in the community to be represented. Like, there's no women leadership in our communities. And you actually have people tell you, like, this is religiously sanctioned. Like, wala hawla wala quwwata illa billah. Then we wonder why young women, as they go to college, where I'm at, in the academy, I worked at Harvard, and I work in Boston, in New York City. I've seen how young Muslim women, who are very adherent in their youth, when they go into these liberal institutions, and they're given agency because of their gender. Agency because of gender. And they start to wonder, man, I had a girl once, she graduated from Stanford Law School. So I can go and volunteer to serve, right, in refugee communities. I can serve with the UN. I went to the mosque and asked people, can I volunteer to help you with your legal issues? And they said, we don't allow women on the board of this masjid. She's like, what? Like, where am I supposed to go with my talent? So the third is that our institutions need to be ran by a representation of everybody. So whether you're poor or rich, we need poor people to be on our boards, to speak and talk about the plight of people that are suffering under these catastrophic economic situations. We need ammos and aunties. We need older people, because older people need services. Like the Prophet said, "Man lam yarham kabirana falaysa minna." You have to take care of old people. We need youth on our board, not people who talk for the youth, but we need people who are young and saying, hey, you know, this is the needs that we have as a young community. These are things that are going to help us maintain our... We need converts. I've actually been in communities where the convert organization is ran and boarded by people who aren't converts. And they would have like converts all in the community. So I'd say to them, like, don't you think your convert board should be ran by converts? And a brother told me, we know better than them. How would you know better than someone? Hadahullah. So another key to unity is the idea of proper representation. And the last component of that would be that major decisions should be made through shura of the whole community. Not day-to-day things, not minor issues like Taraweeh. Like, for example, in Boston, when I was the Imam in Boston, we were praying 8 rakat Taraweeh under Sheikh Baysuni, Hafizahullah. When I came there, we have an old Somali community in their 70s and their 80s, right? Their 90s, some of them are blind. And those ladies came to me and said, like, can you please pray 20? Because 8, you know, when you're 70, man, that 8, boy, that 8 is a monster, brother. And then we had like pregnant women, they're like, brother, that 8, I'm on 6 months, bro. You carry, you know, another 10 pounds and pray 8 rakah, right? So I said, listen, this is something that we should listen to, because the job of the imam is not to follow the madhab. The job of the imam is mara'at al-masalih al-mafasid, to look after what's good for their community in the face of haqq. So we said, you decide. So we did town hall meeting, Taraweeh, y'all want to do 8 or 20? And they wanted 20, so we switched to 20, alhamdulillah. And the community was happy, and they had their voice heard. And they were able to accomplish something that also allowed a lot of our people that were working to pray 8 and what? Go home quicker. So I think those are some things like we should think about now. Avoiding cynicism. We should never lose hope in Allah. Allah is tayyib, and Allah mawjood, alhamdulillah, wajibul wujud, hayyun qayyum. Number 2 is we have to focus on our unity and understand that unity is the outcome of a strategy. Ummah is the outcome of a process. Ummah doesn't just happen. Like ummah is like, I gotta love this brother, you know? I have to invest in him. It's not just like, yeah, we're an ummah, alhamdulillah. No, like, I invest in knowing you, li ta'arafu. So may Allah bless all of you, inshallah, and bless us not to get trumped, the verb, by this era. And to realize, nahnu ala haqq, alhamdulillah. The ummah of the Prophet said, al-khayru fi ummati hatta taqum as-sa'a. There's good in my community till the end of time. And we need to be careful of influences from outside the American Muslim community. Too long we've allowed outside players to shape who we are and what's important to us. Whereas we need to think about creating our own priorities, right? And that allows us to serve, say, Yemen. Look at the great response of our community to the people of the Rohingya, mashallah. How many millions the community sent to Rohingya in 1 year, mashallah. Look at our response to the legal needs of our community after 9/11, whether it was the Holy Land Foundation, whether it was some recent litigations that we won, mashallah. Now in California, just yesterday or today, a major piece of legislation went against the FBI that the Muslims and the ACLU were engaged in, right? We're doing great things, so we shouldn't allow ourselves to be cynical. And then the second is to make our unity the outcome of a very serious strategy, right? How can we bond? Because I'll say it very clearly. Unity isn't just about learning how to function when we agree. Unity is having the maturity to function when we disagree. That I'm that invested in you. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you, inshallah. And now we're going to turn it over to Brother Nihal. Inshallah. Jazakallahu khairan. Wa sallallahu ala sayyid. He told me don't call him Imam. So I said, okay. I'm going to listen to the Imam.
Jazakallah khair. Real quick, actually, is that? I think it's okay. I want everyone to do something which generally we say not to do. I want everyone to take out their phone. I'm about to tell you, you don't have a phone. You're like 4.
Give me Jazza.
You do have a phone?
Jazza.
I take that back. Okay. So we also want to hear from you all. If you all have questions, comments, or concerns to create some streaming to all this madness, what we want to do is, instead of people just shouting out questions, we want you to text your questions. We set up a phone number. Please take down the following phone number for you if you have any questions. It is, 1 second, 201 44, hold on, I messed the number up. 201-477-0549. If you have a question, and please let it be about something that Imam Suhaib spoke about, right? And so that we can basically have a discussion about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Imam Suhaib to kind of elaborate on certain things. So as these questions come in, I'm going to talk about some of the things that Imam Suhaib spoke about, or rather ask him to talk about. So Imam Suhaib, you mentioned cynicism a lot, right? And specifically, within cynicism, this idea of pessimism also exists, right? The community definitely feels hurt. The community consistently feels that their voices are not heard. Now, when it comes to actually removing that sense of cynicism, removing that sense of doubting oneself, especially as young people, like often we talk about in the context of young people, but I think it just exists on a stream. Like it's amongst various segments of the community. How do we go about kind of filling those gaps in and creating a sense of positivity within the communities?
But who wants to hear our voice? Like you said, our voice isn't heard. Like, who's not listening? Like, what's the cause of that frustration?
The cause of that frustration, I think, has to do with unresolved issues from the past. From feeling that your community didn't do you a service or your community didn't do you good. The feeling from that.
Okay, and maybe even with God.
Even with God, maybe if you feel God did you wrong.
That's out there, right?
Yeah.
It's something that I run into. So I think the first is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to engage the collective cultural imagination of Muslims and help them refurnish their understanding of their relationship with God. Like now, something very different. What I see sometimes is we're almost like, God didn't give me my dua, God hates me. Right? Allah didn't give me this job, Allah hates me. Or I'm angry at God.
Yeah.
Whereas, as Muslims, we believe that maybe in not giving is giving. Right? Our trust in Allah is to the point where not receiving is receiving. How do we teach people that? How do we engage people and help them understand that? Right?
Yeah.
The second thing is with community, I think we need to identify who are those strategic partners that you want to hear you. Okay? And then what we do is we find allies. For example, if I'm in your community, you could talk to me. They could talk to you. They could talk to one of the sisters here, right? Who's kind of a mediator that can step to the organization and say, listen, these people have certain issues that they want to be heard. Is there a way that we can mediate an engagement? And hopefully that works. If all avenues don't work, then I can understand why people get frustrated and give up. But at least as a strategy, how do we mediate the ability for each side to listen to one another?
So here's actually a question that kind of goes into it. So one of the biggest sources of cynicism, pessimism often, this person is mentioning, can be our families, family members.
Yeah.
So how do you go about removing that sense of pessimism or cynicism when one can't have a meaningful conversation with their family members? And I'm actually getting a lot of questions about family, right? So I think it goes back into that, I guess, being hurt by those the closest to you.
Yeah, so when I was in Boston and in California, we had this issue, right? Everything from emotional, sexual, physical abuse to just honestly something I think parents may not realize, and even kids who talk to their parents, because we also hurt our parents, is that like words matter, man. And if we're calling our kids like alu kapata and we're gonna go that direction, or like adamul damir wa faqidul qalb wa I don't know, and all these kind of harsh words. This begins to create a memory pattern in that person's life, and they begin to see their value through these terms, right? لا تقولوا راعنا وقولوا انظرنا وقل لعبادي يقولوا التي أحسن. So number one is what we realized, Habibi, what we realized is that we needed to bring in and create relationships with family counselors, because the imams cannot solve these issues. It's beyond our training. We're not trained. We're not clinicians. We're not family therapists. So in Boston, we started a family therapy, like an intake that would see people for free, privately and secretly. And one of the responses I used to have with people when they would tell me, I'm too embarrassed to go to the therapist, I said, well, then you're doing something that makes you embarrassed, so you should stop. Right? Like, if I'm scared to go somewhere because I'm worried I'll be embarrassed for what I did, then what I'm doing is wrong, right? So I should get help. The second thing is that we engaged the community for almost 1 year on addressing issues of stigma around getting clinical help and therapy. So we approached it from the minbar to the classes to bringing in specialists, right? Yeah. So we created opportunities for people. We facilitated understanding and framing it Islamically. And then second and thirdly, as the imam, when people would come into my office and they started to figure this out, right? They would say like, Suhaib only does religious questions. So they would say...
Just a request, can we again keep it down? Because Imam Suhaib's voice is getting drowned out again because of all the people talking.
Sorry,
again, if you need to speak, please step outside if that's okay, right into the lobby. But if you would like to hear the discussion, then you're more than welcome. We just request to keep it down because, as you can tell, the mic system is a little choppy.
MashaAllah, thank you. That was not very effective, but thank you. But so we created a professional mechanism to deal with issues, that we created a vehicle that would encourage community members in a safe and secure way to seek help. And then the third issue was that on the front lines we trained our youth workers, our imams, and even our teachers and counselors, right, to be aware of the type of questions people would bring to them. So people would actually write on the website like, I need to ask Suhaib Webb about meat. And then they would come in the office and be like, last night my husband knocked my teeth out of my mouth. So I was like, what happened to meat? And she was like, well, I'm scared to say this. So we had an intake process where people that would come in with very serious emotional or family issues, we would quietly refer them to our clinicians. And mashallah, man, we saved like at least 30 or 40 marriages. I believe any serious religious institution not only needs to afford its community members religious education opportunities, but they also must partner with clinicians. Man, some of the challenges our young people go through alone, it's incredible how resilient they are. Like anorexia. I get questions every year in Ramadan now that, anorexia, fasting being a trigger for anorexia. People ask me, what's the most common question you got on Snapchat? It was about eyebrows and nose jobs. I know it sounds funny, but what that tells me is you have a community that's like really having some inferiority issues, right? And getting lipo for the dudes to get like 6-packs or whatever. So in that situation, there has to be the opportunity for people, and the community has to let people know, like, that's okay. So that goes back to the leadership of the community, right? And then the intake area are people that are out here working as volunteers, as teachers, Sunday school educators, Islamic school, imams, youth directors, whatever. There is a process of referring people to make sure they get the services they need. These family issues it's easy to get tangled. And for the person that's in that situation, I would advise you now for yourself, number one is find a strong support group to get you out of it. It's hard, man. Like when I converted, I faced tremendous opposition from my family. Like I memorized Surah Al-Baqarah, went home, there's no party. Like I came home and my mom was like, where are you coming from? I was like, oh, I memorized the 2nd chapter of the Quran. She's like, bring me a glass of wine. Like seriously, like there's no celebration, right? Like it's very hard to be positive if your home life, the treadmill is turned against you. So what helps is having a strong supporting group. Number two is, if you're in a university, you have access to counselors and people that can help you. If you're being physically abused, you definitely need to address this now. If you're being sexually abused, you're not a snitch, you're not against Islam. No, Islam does not give anyone the right to sexually or emotionally or physically abuse anybody. لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون. It's in the Quran. And I would encourage those people in that situation. I can get them in touch with people. If you're in New York City, we have a list of Muslim resources. I don't know about here, any house here. But you're not the problem. And that's the last point. The most highly irresponsible thing I've ever heard anyone say is that you are suffering depression or anxiety because your iman is weak. My response is, okay, the person who says that to you, pull out a knife and cut them in the face. And when they start bleeding, you can say to them, you're bleeding because your iman is weak. Right? These things are very different. And sometimes the worst thing we can tell to someone that's broken is to go pray or read the Quran. Because there's conditions for prayer and reading the Quran. One of them is emotional well-being and wholeness. وَآمَنَهُمْ مِنْ خَوْفٍ. Right? In the Quran, Allah says, this is your specialty. You know what I'm talking about. Like, they are secured. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The Quraysh have security. Then a prophet is sent to them. They're not in disarray. Like, they're stable. They have stability. رِحْلَةَ الشِّتَاءِ وَالصَّيْفِ. Then an educator can come. So I would say, like, the community awareness. Number two is partnering with the professionals in the community. Number three, training your entry point folks that may need to know how to recognize issues. Because not everything needs therapy. Not everything needs a counselor, right? It's also bad when you tell someone, they come to you and say, hey, I don't feel good. You're like, leave me alone, go see a therapist. Like basically, I don't care, right? And then the last point we said is like, don't blame yourself for being mistreated. And it's hard when it's your mom, dude. Like it's hard when it's your husband. It's hard when it's your wife. And for those people that are abusing people in this room, like you should fear Allah and go get help, man. Your pain, broken people break people, man. You're broken. Something's broken in you, and you're projecting that on people around you, and you're going to create more broken people, man. And I'm going to say this, and I don't mean to be like hyper offensive to anybody, but like I work in a college, university, like whether Muslim or not, I deal with young people who have been subjected to parental abuse. And the only way I can describe it is like a candle that's like struggling to stay lit, man. And that wind that pushes out that light is the parents. Right? And that's, you don't want to meet Allah having parented your kids that way, or treating your parents, abusing. We had a case of a girl who abused her mom, man. Physically abused her mom. Like, if you're physically abusing someone, you need help. That's not acceptable. So take time out, make tawbah, repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then go and seek help. And there should also, this is the last point, sorry. We should also help the abuser. Ahlan wa sahlan, mashallah. We should help the abuser. We condemn the abuser, but Allah condemns and then offers redemption. فَإِن تَابُوا وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوُوا الزَّكَاةَ فَإِخْوَانَكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ. Allah said, if Abu Sufyan repents, Abu Sufyan is your brother. Right? So the abuser, there's a legal issue that's outside of the parameters of our community. We can't deal with that. But can we help abusers find help to get better and heal instead of just condemning? So I think those are some things to think about with family, man.
Yeah, I think to also add to that, parents oftentimes will bring their kid to the masjid and just be like, hey, can you read a dua on my kid? He's 15, and just like, blow on his face, and then after that, everything will just get like fixed. Like, which is a result of like 15 years of bad parenting.
It's gonna get into brown.
Yeah, right? But I'm getting a lot of questions on this. But there is one thing which I think is an interesting question. Will Allah punish a person if that person is forced to avoid their parents because the parents are emotionally abusive towards those children? And here's the thing, right? I think a lot of, it's the reality of it is that amongst a lot of immigrant families, specifically South Asian and Arab families, emotional abuse is just considered a part of the equation of living in your household, right? It's like considered like, okay, your father will call you names, your mother will call you names. And in that context, maybe in a different context, it was fine. But as Imam Suhaib said, that's not the prophetic context, right? Rasulullah ﷺ used to refer to those nearest to him in very loving ways. But like when it comes to that specific aspect where a child has tried to talk to their parents, they've tried to sit them down, go outside with them, like, you're hurting me in the way that you're treating me. Can that child kind of veer away from their parents?
Yeah, let's get into first steps, right? Let's say that someone here, either the parent is hurting them or they're hurting their parents. There needs to be, first is like mediation. Go to the local religious leader and say, listen, I want to talk with my parent, or I want to talk to my child about your actions. Like if you've already tried to communicate one-on-one, you seek mediation. And you make it clear that you're hurting me, man. Like this is actually hurting me. Like you're hurting me, and it's not allowed. The challenge with all of this, right, is that, and I get this question a lot, if you're being abused, and I'm going to say this, probably the last time I come here, if you're being abused by someone, you have a right to abandon them. Meaning you have a right not to be around them to the point that you are being compromised emotionally and physically and financially. So for example, my father now is 80 years old. My mother died, God bless her, she's an amazing woman, 3 years ago. My father and I do not get along at this moment. It just happens, right? He's 80 years old, he thinks he's 18, man. And he's a Knicks fan. So, which is like almost irreparable. But my conversation with my father was like, I'm going to support you financially, but I need to keep some distance from you physically. Because like, you are creating trouble, man, for me and my sibling. He's not a criminal, it's nothing like that. It's just going through a late midlife crisis at 80. Point is, I don't feel any religious problem pulling away from him in a way that protects my sanity and my wife and my kids, right? But I'm still supporting him financially. So I think that it's perfectly acceptable to pull away from someone Islamically. We have numerous narrations in the time of the Prophet that the Prophet separated women from their husbands for physical abuse. Okay? Because the goal of Islam is to prevent harm and bring benefit. And a person shouldn't feel guilty. So if you've been raised, and God help us, give you healing. And we as a community need to create support groups for people, man. Like if we really love, I said ummah is the outcome of a process. One of the processes of an ummah is a healing component. Like if we know that there are young men and women struggling with, like we opened an AA in our mosque. Our mosque in Boston had an Alcoholics Anonymous for Muslims. And people got mad. They told me, you're crazy, you're encouraging drinking. How am I encouraging drinking with the Alcoholics Anonymous? But then once it got started, because I know the backside of the community because I was the Imam. The Imam is the one who lifts up the wood and sees all the bugs, right, in the soil. People came to me and they were like, man, I'm so glad this happened. Like, God bless this community because this is the first time that my significant other was able to find Islamic agency through Alcoholics Anonymous. So they were motivated by Allah to stop drinking. And that's the only thing that worked. So if I really say I love the ummah, I care about the ummah, then I also have to facilitate groups for people that have been abused. Man, there's a lonely island in this community called divorcee, especially for women. What kind of services do we offer for people that are just like lonely, man? So I would say, first and foremost, if you're being abused, you are not obligated to stay in that situation. And no one should tell you that you religiously are just supposed to take it to the jaw. That's horrible advice. It's un-Islamic advice, right? Yeah.
So there are still more questions coming in. Here's one, and it's something you touched on. Some of you may have heard about this. In New Jersey and California, actually, the Democrats passed a law saying that it is going to be obligatory and compulsory upon students to learn LGBTQ history within their textbooks. And this is within the schools, within elementary schools. So one thing that someone asked was that within the Muslim community, people deal with same-sex attraction. How should they go about dealing with that?
I don't understand the two issues, how they...
Specifically, right, we've had all this talk about, okay, the marriage equality SCOTUS decision came into play. So I guess the culture of it has been changing, obviously, but within the community, nobody's talking about it. It's as if like it's just something in the back. But now people are dealing with issues of same-sex attraction, right? So how does someone go about dealing?
That goes back to again having a relationship with professionals, right? Sexual therapists even. I think also as a community we are obligated to affirm that we believe it's sinful behavior. Like we need to be clear that we consider it as sinful behavior. But like any sinful behavior, our position to anyone in our community is welcoming but not affirming. This needs to be a policy. Welcoming, but my job in the mosque is not to affirm your personal life. Right? I've always wondered why people want to come and like say, hey, last night I shot a bottle of heroin and smoked a 20 Primo of crack. Is that okay? Like, why are you asking me this? Like, I can't affirm this. Right? And it's like weird. Like, it's like a weird kind of, I need to be valued by your rejection or your affirmation, right? But I think with everyone in our community, our policy is welcoming but not affirming. Meaning we welcome everyone to the mosque, we welcome everyone to our community, but we cannot affirm sinful behavior. That's just the limit of وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. We don't have to be mean and harsh and jerks about it. I've known people that have struggled with same-sex attraction and who've said, like, I respect the limits of the Quran and I respect the limits of the tradition. So I told that person, you're a mujahid fi sabilillah. Like, this is a great form of spiritual struggle. Number 3 is we can do that also without being homophobic. We don't need to adopt the language of the far right on homophobia, right? We hate the far right, but when it comes to sin, we often find the Muslim community using the nomenclature of the far right, which is remarkably crazy. Whereas we have our own nomenclature. We have sinful behavior. We believe that sinners are Muslims. Al-Muslimun kullum awliya ar-Rahman, Al-Tahawi said that. And everybody sins. We don't affirm sinful behavior. We encourage people to avoid sinful behavior. At the same time, we don't want to kick people out of the masajid. So there's a lot to unpack in that question. I think when it comes to our children, I think you need to have a conversation, I would, with the educator and say, listen, this is going to go to the courts, by the way. I think it's in the courts now. You can't force my child to learn something, right? And that goes back to, again, creating strong Islamic schools. The Catholics, by the way, have their own problems, we know. But when it comes to Catholic education, they have that on lock. And they have like great school. I know Muslims who send their daughters to Catholic private school, right? Because of the quality of the school. We need to take education and the process and institution of education building very seriously, because our community has drifted left. Understandably so, okay? But with the left comes a host of other challenges. If the challenge on the right is a challenge of physical survival, the challenge on the left may be one of spiritual survival. Because the left has made a major mistake after MLK, and that is it has untethered itself from the church and untethered itself from religious discipline. Whereas we are a community tethered by God. So we have to say we believe this type of behavior is not appropriate, but we don't adopt the language of homophobes and the far right, because that would be a contradiction, right? Then that takes us into like working together and other things. I can work together with someone without having to affirm their behavior, right? For example, those 4,000 kids kept at the border down there in San Diego. If a gay organization says, we're going to go, can you guys go? I'm saying, if we're going for that, I don't have a problem with that. But if you ask me to come out and sanction that behavior, I can't do that. And that's where that give and take has to happen.
Yeah, I think also on top of that, sinning is sinning at the end of the day. Some people sin differently, right?
Yeah.
Right. Some people may struggle with alcohol. Some people may struggle with pornography. Some people may struggle with keeping their hand and their voice from harming other people, right? And certain sins have a cultural context to them that's a bit more rough than other sins, and we ought to understand that. There was someone that asked an interesting question. So now you've been all over the country, right? You've been in since you came back from Egypt, you've been in California, you've been in D.C., you've been in Boston, and now you're in New York. So you've gotten a chance to really check out a lot of major metro areas in the United States.
Yeah.
In that context, I got asked a question when it comes to leadership and getting involved and having your voice heard. What are good models that you've seen implemented in Muslim communities where people felt that like their voice was inclusive? Women felt like their voice was inclusive. Youth felt like their voice was inclusive. Professionals felt like their voice was inclusive. Senior citizens felt like their voice was inclusive. Yeah. What models did you see, and what models do you think our communities ought to be working towards? And notice I'm saying communities. I'm not just going to throw everything on the board, because that's an easy thing to do, but it's a community effort at the end of the day.
Yeah, in the Christian church now you have the idea of deliberate community, because they feel like the word community is just used so arbitrarily. Yeah. We're all one community. No, we're not. What did you eat for lunch?
Same thing you did.
No. Okay. Well, someone else didn't, right? Yeah. So we're not all the same, right? It's not a monolith. We could talk about what happened at lunch if you'd like. I think a great community I've seen is like, I hate to say, like Imam Khalid, my boss, obviously. I think Imam Khalid has done a great job. I think Omar Bajwa at Yale has done a great job. I think ISBCC in Boston, initially, I think they've been doing some good work.
But like in these communities, what are the principles?
So here, I'm about to say something. I don't believe that young people now are going to be looking for leadership models through communities anymore. They're going to look at Muslims of the world, man. You know what I mean? Why would I waste my time, I hate to say this, going to a mosque and being slapped in the face and abused and not welcomed, when I can go and volunteer at SuhaibWebb.com or Muslims of the World or Swiss and like immediately find like respect and appreciation. So I think we need to understand something right now. The world is shifting. People are no longer looking for the concrete building to learn how to lead. You can go online and kill it and find a lot of, so SuhaibWebb.com 10 years ago, in 2 years we had 163 interns.
Really?
Yeah, because these kids were, hey, I can write. Or they write. I'm a good editor. Well, edit. I'm a good designer. Design. Right? Lately, my videos are more, I'm just saying this as an example, right? More on YouTube. Why? Some young people came to me like, dude, you do not know how to make videos. I was like, yeah, well, you don't know how to read Warsh. Right? You teach me Premiere Pro. I teach you how to read Quran. Would I rather go through that avenue? We got guy Muslims of the world here, Sajjad. Would I rather go through that avenue where I'm going to be welcomed? There's people that are my own age, right? But you lose something there, and not with him. I'm saying old folks got things to offer.
Yeah.
So I don't think that young Muslims are necessarily going to start looking for leadership models through the older model.
Yeah.
They're going online. They're creating communities online, groups online that allow them to have agency, respect, and not intimidation. So I think those I'm saying are like the best models, where you're finding, a strong peer group, a sense of not being constantly told you're right, but like not being hammered.
Yeah.
What's lost in that is first of all, like I believe old immigrant people are vessels of wisdom. Just like old converts in this country are vessels of wisdom. When I sidestep that, I may miss some of the knowledge that I need to learn. You know what I mean?
Right.
I may miss some of the political history in the country of dealing with the Democrats and the Republicans and the Baptists and the Catholics and the Jewish community and whoever. So I might miss things. But at the same time, look at what's happening. Like, you got, hijab women, they have like 5 million followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
Their impact just on Islam alone is very profound. But if you were to go into mosque, nobody would know who they are. You got young brothers, musicians, right, who would initially have to just negotiate the validity of their professional career in a mosque. Whereas online, as a halal musician, okay, I'm saying that in the most liberal, Dawian way, right, they don't have to negotiate being a musician. So they immediately can sidestep the problems. But sometimes those problems are good for us too, right? So we'll see, but I think now the best model are those online models. I really think that's the future.
And in the online model, you're specifically talking about education, or?
I'm talking about everything, right? Because not everybody wants to be a sheikh.
Right.
Not everybody wants to be religious. But they may find groups of people in those settings where they're artists, lawyers, Bitcoiners, gamers. They worry about telling stories. They want to talk about narrative. They're engaged in the arts. They are finding community and creating mega communities or an iconic figure that leads that mega community without the hassle.
That's there, but then I think there is that sense of validity, but I think also on the ground, I think people are looking for actual in-person community. I mean, from your experience, have you found that if somebody has an online community that they don't find themselves in need of an on the ground?
They do have a need for an on-ground community, but they're able to say, hey, that's like second place.
Okay.
As a young person right now, I may be, think about it. I can say when I was 20, I converted. I was scared to go to the mosque, man. Even though I was memorizing the Quran. Because I was just worried that if I went to the mosque, someone's going to get into me.
Yeah.
I mean, that in itself is enough to like push someone away for a while.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas I could have found people online, white converts from Oklahoma community or whatever, and not have to worry so much about that direct sanctioning, which is good and bad. I'm with you. Yeah. And there will be a time in someone's life where you definitely need real relationships. That's true.
Okay.
But I see the model now as shifting. So look at Muslim Matters.
Yeah.
Shifted. Look at, Bayina. Shifted. Look at the whole kind of scene is moved towards a more virtual setting. Right?
All right, let's...
We've got a few minutes.
Yeah, let's... I'm going to end this, inshallah, on a...
Want to do like a quick question answer round?
Some of these interesting questions are there.
I mean, it's awesome, man. Look at the questions. You guys ask awesome questions, man.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
It's beautiful.
Okay, I'm just going to rapid fire you 3 of them, and then you can just answer them.
All right.
Number 1 is, specifically this, I think I got this question like 3 times. how do you think women should take on leadership within their masjid? That's number one. Number two is, how do you retain talented people in the community? Like, you see people moving to Dallas or Houston. Why would you move to Houston? But, right, you see people moving out. How do you retain that talent? And then number three, what was your story on accepting Islam?
So I think for the first two questions is a simple answer, and that is you should bring in a strategic consultant. You should bring in a strategic consultant and help you walk through what it looks like. So women's leadership, what do women want in leadership? What are their expectations, right? What kind of cultural crashes are going to happen when that happens? It's going to happen. So who are the allies who are going to make that happen, who are going to walk us through that? What religious leaders are going to be able to answer some of the misused texts that people say, like, la yuflihu qawman, people are not successful when a woman leads them, and so on and so forth, right? So there's a religious component, but then also I think institutions need a strategic consultant to give them like a 10 to 15-year plan. That 10 to 15-year plan should deal with stability. What's the long-term financial stability of the community? Is it just going to be do fundraisers after Friday prayer? We're going to actually think about investments. Number two is, it gets into issues like leadership. What is the leadership moving forward going to look like? And what other leadership models can we explore? Till now, I've never seen a mosque in America that has employed a different theory of leadership except the standard board, executive committee, imam, then pray for volunteers. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the model. But there are other models of leadership that are effective and that nonprofits are taking on, especially religious nonprofits that are very powerful. It's a great synagogue in New York where a rabbi basically said to his flock, like, I can no longer do all this. Either you guys are going to take on the responsibility or I have to leave. And they stood up, and it's now a community-ran, or it's like a farmer's market synagogue. In a sense, everybody has a place. Everybody's running something. I think a strategy for leadership is transparency. These millennials, man, they're not about taking on this nonsense, right? You look at the office buildings that millennials have, it's all glass. Why is it all glass? That's a beautiful thing, because they want sincerity. I want to see what you do, right? I don't want, watch that little guy behind you. I don't know what he's doing. I don't want to not know. I want to know, right? And then the third would be that, what was the second question?
The second question was retaining
talent. Again, that goes back into having a long-term strategy. Your talent is going to leave, right? Nobody wants to live in New York forever because it's too expensive. So we know that we're going to have a constant influx of people, right? So how do I think about recruiting young people, bringing them entry points, right? There's a great book called Sticky Churches. Sticky Churches, great book. Talks about how do you get entry points and then keep people in the entry point to the point that they can go back to the entry point and bring in someone new, and when they leave, there's someone there, right? It's not just, I'm leading, I'm a great leader, ma salama. When I was president of the MSA, personally, one of the things I said to myself is, if I'm really an effective MSA president, I will have someone better than me next year when I leave. And that was Brother Ali Mujahid, mashallah, from Lahore. What's up? But Ali Mujahid, mashallah, zindagi be bandagi shamindagi, bro. He killed. I did Islamic Awareness Week. He did Islamic Awareness Month. Okay? The point is, I felt, okay, now I've done what I need to do. The last one, my story, it's online. It's not a big deal. It's like simple story. Some white cracker dude from Oklahoma. Allah guided him, alhamdulillah, he became Muslim, alhamdulillah. It's online, inshallah, you can find it there. But in short, my friend in high school was a Muslim, and I used to produce for him and DJ for him, and he had a copy of the Quran in the studio. So, through copious amounts of marijuana, I'm sorry, that was before Islam, and reading the Quran, that's just how it happened. Like, he was really, he passed away, Allah yarhamu, but like, he was someone who, he wasn't the most practicing Muslim. But one of my teachers used to say, فُسَقَاؤُنَا أَوْلِيَاؤُهُمْ يعني. Our sinners are the awliya of the non-Muslims. Because our awliya, the non-Muslims, not ready for the awliya. Right? But for a non-Muslim, a sinner is that step to Allah. Right? So as a seeker, if I had came in contact with me, I'd have been like, oh, heck no, man. Right? But with him, he's like, yeah, we a little wild, but I pray. I was like, you still pray? You live like... He's like, you got to pray, dude. I'm like, that's crazy. Like, that's so. And then I was like, man, look at that commitment, dude. Like, dang, we're at the club, he's praying. Like, wow. You know what I mean? He still prayed. So I was like, that's crazy. So that, just that sohbah, right? فُسَقَاؤُنَا أَوْلِيَاؤُهُمْ يعني. خلاص.
So there are actually several questions that I received about certain people in their personal situations, in their marriage situations, and abuse situations. Imam Suhaib's here, so I'd recommend speaking to him privately here.
No, hold on. I don't do marriage stuff. I'm sorry. I'm not good at it. But I think if you can give them a local, talented, mashallah person, that would be great. Or they can get in touch with like Dr. Ali Suleiman in Detroit, who does Muslim family services. I'm not,
You know, on that point, there's something in Atlanta I saw which was really awesome. A bunch of therapists in Atlanta actually got together and created something called the Muslim Professional Service. So basically what they did was,
give me a second.
what they did was, give me 1 second, actually, 1 second.
Meet someone outside. He's leaving.
Okay. I was going to ask you, someone asked a question if they can invest in the cannabis business.
No.
Okay, no. But there's actually a really good idea in that regard to get a list of therapists together. So that would be a good idea, inshallah. So I guess with that, we will go ahead and close it out for the night. Jazakallah khair. If you see any trash around, please pick it up, please throw it out. And Imam Suhaib's in the back, inshallah, so you can meet with him. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين واستغفروه إنه الغفور الرحيم. جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.